And today we're going to discuss the actual Seder. And it's interesting that it's called the Seder, it's called the order, because the order is a way we can, there's a couple of reasons why we have the order. Number one, history is chaotic. History, events in history, they seem unplanned and just streaming and just without rhyme or reason. So Yetziat Mitzrayim gave some rhyme and reason to the order. And Yetziat Mitzrayim gave us put order in all the suffering we have. That's one reason for the order. Another reason is that we have some type of boundary. We're free to explore as long as we have some. And the Seder, the order that we have, and we start with Kadesh and Chas, we know the order. It allows us to expand on things, allows us to take little risks out into ideas and discussions that, and we always know where to come back to. We know where we are in the Seder, and we know, and there's a text that we come back to once in a while. We read the text, but also we have flights of fans. Okay, sorry about that. Let me just get back the. Okay, yeah, sorry about that, guys. So the order allows us something to go back to, it gives us a framework to get back into, and therefore it puts order into our lives. We have some musicians over here. I think Lenny's a musician. We all know that when we improvise, we have some of the basic chord structure that we go back to when we go for our flights of fancy. So the Seder gives us order into what we're doing, and allows us some freedom. The one time the owner of the Azrieli Mall in Tel Aviv, some of the highest buildings in Tel Aviv, took the president up to the top of the tower, and he said, "You see this fence over here? This fence allows us to go right to the edge because we have the fence that puts us in. So it keeps us it keeps us in order." I'm trying to open my PowerPoint, unable to for some reason. Hold on. Okay, let's. Says it's open in another program. I'm not sure how to do this. Hold on one second. Okay, I'll do it without the PowerPoint. Oh, I know how to do it. Okay. Now we start the Seder with the Kiara. We start the Seder with the Seder, the plate. Now the way we set up the plate has always been a mystery to me, so I thought I would explore it this year a little more and look into what the Seder the plate means and why we set it up the way we are. So the, this particular seder that we have follows the custom of the Ari Hakadosh, the seder plate, and it's you see over here the different names. This is where we set up the seder. We have the three matzot on top, the zroa bitzah, charoset. You see it over here, the three matzot, the shank bone, the egg, one type of lettuce, bitter herbs, celery, the charoset, which is like a date, or and the apples, and the chazeret, which is another type of greens. But we also see, and this is in our Haggadot of the Syrian community, we also see the sefirot that are over here, the chesed, gevurah, tiferet, netzach, hod, yesod, and malchut. And we are, I mean, we've always set up the seder this way. The, the plate is this way, that's in the picture, is in our thing. So this is actually, instead of just serving the food on the table, we put the food in a certain order. So it actually is just holding the idea of the seder. And why is it in this way? This is the traditional way of looking at this, the sefirot, which are part of the Kabbalah understanding, and we put the order in the order that the sefirot are ordered in, which is if we look at this is the traditional tree of the sefirot. So the chesed and gevurah and tiferet, the sefirot come in three groups. You could say the first group, the higher group of chokhmah, binah, and the keter, which is da'at. The second group, which is chesed, gevurah, and tiferet in the middle. And the third group of netzach, hod, yesod, and malchut being the bottom one. So the setup of the table of the plate itself follows a certain order, and there's reasons behind it that are connected to the meanings behind these orders. I don't know too much about it, but the Ari felt that was an important way, and for people who understand it, they look at it and they say, oh, that's there's also that's the body. It's a symbol of the body, and then the Ari goes into a very detailed explanation about why the order is the way it is. The three matzot are Kohen, Levi, and Israel, and also they are Chokhmah, Binah, V'Dat, and he goes into the whole meaning. Without getting too much into it, the point that I want to make is that normally when we serve on the table, everything is set up very nicely, and when the food comes in, we put the food in different places. Here, the food is very organized, and for people who understand the sefirot, the 10 emanations of God, and so from God into the world, Malchut being the bottom one, is the looks at the plate. So it's turning chaos into order. It's part of the idea of the Seder. Now, this is the list of the Seder that we do, and we notice that it is it's really in 4 different groups of the words, and they actually have almost all of them rhyme. Kadesh Chatz, Yachatz, Nochza, Masa. So there's an order involved in that, an order in the disorder, an order in the chaos. It's what Yetziat Mitzrayim did to put the Israel in order. And it's one of the messages that the very act of the Seder is that although history might look chaotic in its face value, really it's Hashem behind it, ordering it. And that's why it's so important to do the Seder and to have the idea of order and chaos, order in history. There is a guiding hand, there is a providence in history, there is hashkacha, and that is part of the idea of the Yetziat Mitzrayim, is that Hashem makes his presence into the world, presence known, and he is ordering the world. Okay, I want to make a comment about the karpas, and this is about actually how to run the Seder. Uh, uh, how much karpas can you eat, and what's the purpose of karpas? The purpose of karpas is that we're going to have a long, it's what we would call in the Syrian community, what we'd call maza. What is a maza? Is you eat foods along the way as you're talking, as you're singing, as you're doing something. You shouldn't be hungry. You're sitting at the table. You're not going to be eating the main meal for a while, and so we only make kiddush. And what are you going to do with that whole time? So the karpas, in its essence, was a way of satisfying a little bit of your appetite with finger foods and with okay celery, crudités, carrots. That in our home we do the egg at this point, or even we have some soup for people who would like to eat a little bit, and we so the karpas. Now, Shulchan brings an idea of you don't have to eat a kazait. That's turned into by the Mishnah you can't eat the kazait, and that's based on the Maharil, one opinion. However, you see in front of you the Rambam's opinion. The Rambam in Hilchot Chametz Matzah says that you begin and you make the blessing. I'm translating Borei Pri Adama, and you take a green vegetable and you dip it into the charoset. We do salt water at that point or vinegar. Rochel kezait, and you eat a kezait. והוא וכל המסובים עמו, כל אחד ואין אוכל פחות מכזית. Rambam says explicitly, you should not eat less than a kazait. In fact, he says you have at least a kazait. So the whole purpose of the karpas is defeated by those who are very careful about safek berachot lehakel, end up causing the seder to be, okay, when are we going to get to the food already? And it's a natural feeling when we are making kiddush, we're sitting at the table, and if you're not eating something, munching on something, so the purpose of the karpas, in my view, and I think the Rambam's view, is that you should not be starving as you're discussing the other side, but you should be you should have something to fill your appetite. I know this is not the generally accepted view, but I know that in the Sedarim that we run, they're run in a very calm way because everyone wants to eat. There's the eggs, there's celery, there's carrots, there's potatoes, there's whatever you like, even soup, to be able to feed your appetite. I'm not going to go through the whole seder now. There's just main points that I'd like to comment on. Of course, the achat we put the things aside for the afikoman, and then we get to the halachman. Now, when we learned last week, we learned one of the sources of the seder. We learned the Mishnah. And the Mishnah has a couple of ideas, and I'd like to just take a brief view of that idea in the Mishnah and how the Seder is to be run. The Mishnah is found in Masechet Pesachim, and in the Mishnah, the Mishnah speaks about the second cup. I'm going to share the screen again. The attendants sorry. Okay, the Mishnah Masechet Pesachim says the attendants pour the second cup for the leader of the Seder, and here the son asks his father the questions. And if the son doesn't have intelligence, the father teaches him. So it's based on questions. The questions are not the manishtana. The questions are real questions that people have, and we expanded on that last week in length. Now, the idea of it being built on questions is because the questions cause us to expand our knowledge. So one of the basic ideas of the Seder is that it's built on questions. If the son does not understand, does not know how to ask, then the father teaches him Mani Shana. If the son does not have intelligence, the father teaches him what he teaches him is how different is this night, and that's really they're not questions. They're really in terms of him, the father pointing out things that don't make sense, and the way the Rabbi explains it is that this is pointing out the contradictions in the evening. There are some things that are reminiscent of freedom and some things that are reminiscent of slavery. And it's really to get the son to ask, or the Seder people at the Seder to ask different questions. So now I want to go back to the text of the Manishtana in our tradition, in the Sephardi tradition, and that is that according to the Abarbanel, the contradictions are on the one hand we dip twice. In other words, where it's a meal with a buffet beforehand and hors d'oeuvres and a mezza beforehand. It's like a great meal. On the other hand, we're eating matzah, which is a little bit of not the best bread that we can have. On one hand, we have maror, which is slavery. On the other hand, we recline. These are things that the father points out to get the son to ask the questions. And Barbanel says in a great way that the Abadim Hayinu Lefaro, Hashem, we were slaves and now we're free, reflects that contradiction. Because we're talking about a juncture between slavery and freedom. The evening represents that juncture. One of the other aspects that the Mishnah says is that we begin with disgrace, something disgraceful, something that we're embarrassed about, and we end with glory. The terminology of the Mishnah is we start with genut, we start with something disgraceful, and we end with glory, something that we're praiseworthy and that we're happy about and proud about. And the Moraim in the Gemara explain that in two ways. And Shmuel have a machloket, what exactly that is. One looks at it in terms of the physical enslavement, and that's the Avadim Hayinu, from disgrace to glory. In the physical sense, we were slaves, and now we're free. And that is it's not that we did something disgraceful, but being a slave is in the ancient world, in the medieval world, was a lower class of society, and being a slave, and now we're free, being a free person is obviously a better status than being a slave, and that's according to one of the opinions. And we also go according to another one of the opinions of the spiritual disgrace to glory, from being a pagan, being an idol worshiper, and then serving Hashem. In other words, we come to Hashem took us and brought us from being idol worshippers to being to serving Hashem. And so the Seder also has this idea of inclusivity. We're going to put together different opinions, and we're going to do both of them, because the Yetziat Rav Shmuel is said that the most important aspect of Yetziat Mitzrayim is the fact that we were slaves and brought to freedom. This was maybe the basic aspect of Yetziat Mitzrayim, and the Rav takes it a level higher and says the more important aspect is that we were brought to Har Sinai, we were brought out of Egypt, which was a spiritual growth. The first step of our spiritual improvement and upgrading was when we were in Mitzrayim, we were even Ovdei Avodah Zarah, we were idol worshippers, pagans in Mitzrayim, according to Yechezkel. and Hashem brought us out of that into serving Him. So, how do we start, and why do we start this way? For two reasons. One is that it makes us happy. We take what we have for granted. We can take what we have for granted because it's what we have. And when we remind ourselves where we started as a nation, the feeling of not taking anything for granted is and being grateful is 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 amplified. So reminding ourselves that we started out as slaves, as a nation. Our nation started out being enslaved. Reminds us how great it is to be free, how great it is not to be slaves. That's on the one part of it. On the second part of it, the fact that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim reminds us that there's hashgacha. So Pesach is about creating that sense of hashgacha, of providence, of God watching over us. And in fact, that was the overriding message to the world, to Paro and to the world, is that there is a God and He's involved in the world. So the reason we start from disgrace and go to glory is for number one, to be grateful and to be happy. I mean, thinking about where we came from and where we are can create a feeling of happiness, number one. And number two, it does give us a sense of that Hashem is involved in the world. The Seder, one of the other aspects of the Mishnah, it says that we according to the knowledge of the child, that's how we do the Seder. The Seder is according to the intelligence of the child. So let me just share the screen again. And according to the intelligence and the ability of the son, his father teaches him about the Exodus. So that is taken care of in the Seder. We remind ourselves about that in the Keneged Arba'a Banim Dibera Torah, and this is found in the Haggadah, and we're going to look at those sections now. We begin with Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu, which is sort of a introduction. This is Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu, is an introduction to the next four sections. And the names of the Hacham, Rashat, Ham, Rishon, Daily Shol are different in different manuscripts of the Haggadah, but we'll use the generally accepted one that we have that's used all over the world today. And the sons are actually psukim that are listed that we went over last week. It's psukim in the Torah that mention the children in some way, shape, or form, and we're going to look at the Baal Haggadah is the one though that labels them Hacham, Rasha, Tam, V'shelo Yodei Lishol, based on hints that he gets from the psukim themselves. And we're going to look at these things one by one, and really look at the answers that are given and why they're given. Chacham, the Chacham, the Baal Haggadah, we don't know who wrote it. It was probably written by many people over many centuries, but there is a person that is formulating this, and he is coming to an idea of how do you reflect the idea of according to the intelligence of the son. That's how you teach it. Chacham mahu omer, מה העדות והחוקים והמשפטים אשר ציווה אדוני אלוהינו אתכם, That is a pasuk from Devarim, from Sefer Devarim, and it's in the context of the Seder Pesach, and there's a different answer in that in the context of the pasuk. But according to the Baal Haggadah, to the Chacham, you teach him all the laws of Pesach. There are parts that are chukim, parts that are edot, testimonies, in other words, they're ritual actions that are reminding us of things that happened, parts that are not understood, parts that are understood. And you tell him all of Hilchot Pesach. According to the Chacham, according to his wisdom, you tell him. You tell him the Pesach. Now, we take this to mean that you have to be aware of your audience. You have to be aware who's at the table. Not everyone at the table is going to understand the Hebrew. Not everyone at the table is old enough. Sometimes we're dealing with young children or grandchildren, and we have to tailor make the Seder to the people that were at, particularly at our Seder.
Right.
If we just read the Haggadah, we did not accomplish the purpose of the evening. The purpose of the evening is that everyone should be infused with the idea that Hashem exists and his providence, his hashkacha, his supervising eye is over history. That is such an important idea, and I believe it is one of the secrets of the survival of our people. And we'll get to that B'ezrat Hashem next week, how that works. But according to the child, according to the audience, that's how the Seder has to be run. There are times in my life when my children were very little that I took time. I was with my father-in-law, and he was reading the Seder, and I just didn't read the Seder. I took the time and explained to my, 6, 5, and 4, and 3-year-old girls in language they can understand, and that was a critical part of what the evening is about. It's not about getting to the Haggadah. It's about conveying an idea, conveying the important ideas that I believe are the secret of our survival. Getting back to the four children, and the second one is Rasha. Rasha mahu omer, ma ha'avodah azot lachem. So now, in order to understand this derasha, we have to look at the words in the pasuk, because the derasha, these are the words in the pasuk. Of course, it's cut. It's some of the words in the pasuk, and the Baal Haggadah, the darshan, is saying lachem velo lo. He's looking at the service of Pesach, and he's saying it's to you all and not to me, not to him. So it's a derasha on the words lachem velo lo. Now the famous question is, but also the Chacham uses the word etchem. But the Baal Haggadah is very, very sharp, and we spoke about this a little bit last week. In the verses themselves, by the Chacham, so-called Chacham, it says when your son should ask you. But by the Rasha, it says when he should say to you. So the Baal Haggadah sees this not as a question, but kind of like a statement. Last week we said it in the following way. We said, instead of asking, oh, what is this service that you're doing? The son is exclaiming, oh, what is this service you're doing? Because he's mocking it, belittling it. And that's from the word that precedes the pasuk in the Torah. By the Chacham it says when he should ask you, and by the Rasha it says what he should say to you. So very astutely and very sharply, the Baal Haggadah is seeing this as the words, a statement of the Rasha. And lachem velo, and therefore since he took himself out of the group by saying to you and not to me, kafar beikar, afata kachinav, you hit him in the teeth also, and you tell him, and this is not the answer that's given in the context, but taken from somewhere else. Li lo, for this, God took me out of Egypt, me, and not you. If he would have been there, he wouldn't have been saved. It's rough. It's rough. What kind of answer is this? And how is this? The Rasha is at the table. He's at the Seder, and there could be times in our life we have people at the Seder that maybe normally do not keep mitzvot, and even maybe uh, they don't even keep Shabbat, or maybe they don't even believe in God. Are we going to do this? Are we going to say, is this how we would treat them? Uh, the Baal Haggadah is, I think, is giving a kind of tough love kind of situation where he's saying, uh, you want to be part of this of the Jewish people, but you don't want to believe in God. It doesn't work that way. If you are going to be, if you want to be part of the Jewish people, you have to believe in God and you have to believe in the service. So I understand it as a kind of tough love situation that he's giving to the to the Rasha. Now, I would say in our days, that's not the way to work with people. The, After moving to Tel Aviv, uh, I moved to Tel Aviv about 7, 8 months ago, and I used to live in a town of 60 people, 60 families, all of them religious. And now I live in a building with 60 families. Most of them are not religious. And in fact, there was one person I invited over for Shabbat, uh, and he said, uh, I'll come after the Kiddush, after you do the religious stuff, because I don't believe in God. Uh, and I've had a lot of experience with people who don't believe in God. I've had other examples of it in my life. And I know this person, we became very close friends, we became friends, and we share articles and books together. And I know that one day he comes around a lot and he wants connection. Um, so I was playing in a band near Haifa, and singer the band, a guy named Sharon, top dermatologist in Israel. He was also the singer of the band, and he said, "Oh, listen, Raphael, I'm not religious. I don't believe in God." And I said, "Okay, fine." Uh, Kept contact with him. We even went out to eat together a couple times. After a couple times, he comes to me and says, "Raphael, my daughter is pretty sick. Would you be able to? Would you pray for her?" I said, Sharon, we can pray together. This says, no, I don't know how to pray really, but would you pray? No, we can pray together. We prayed. Now, I'm not saying he became Shomer Shabbat or stopped eating shrimp, but Am Yisrael has a connection. And I don't know for whom this approach of the Rasha would work, but if they're at the Seder table, then they're connected, and we have to see how we can bring people in. Most of Am Yisrael celebrates Pesach all over the world. In Israel, especially, it's one of the most celebrated holidays. Uh, Continuing on with that, with our 4 children, is some people just like it simple and straight, and that's the Tam. The Tam, the he just give it to me straight and simple. Now, our young children, they're not going to understand all the Haggadah, and they're not going to understand the intricacies of the Haggadah. They just need to hear straightforward things, and the Tom is answered with a very straightforward approach. Again, the idea is we have to really be aware of our audience and with whom we're speaking. So the Tom is simply בחוזק יציאת מצרים מבית עבדים, simply. ושאינו יודע לשאול, הפתח לו. And we looked at this pasuk last week. The pasuk doesn't have a question. It doesn't have any. It just has the father opening up with the Gata lemincha b'yom ha'u lemor, and you should tell your children on that day, saying, "Bavul ze asa Adonai li b'tzitim b'Mitzrayim," and we have to see how to bring our children to ask questions. As we said, questioning is the main part of the Seder evening. It's the basis of the Seder evening, because questioning means we're trying to expand our knowledge. We're trying to open up new horizons of thought that we didn't have before. And we read last week that the Gemara says, the Baraita says, if a person is alone on the Seder night, he should ask himself questions. And asking yourself questions means you're trying to expand your knowledge. And it is a great way to think about how to new aspects of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of the Exodus of Egypt, that we're not aware of. At one point in the Seder, I'm skipping a little bit, at one point in the Seder, we cover the matzah again, and we say, Hi sha'amda lavotenu velanu. And we cover the matzah, we raise that cup of wine. I think this is a critical point in the Seder, a critical part of the message of the Seder night, and it's and we bring attention to it. We emphasize it by raising the cup of wine, and when we raise the cup of wine, we cover the challah, and that is I think the most important, and this is the secret of our survival, I believe, is contained in this sentence that we say in Seder night, and I think we lose it a little bit when we sing it right at the outset. So that's why I always say it and explain it first, and then we can sing it, because this sentence, Hi sha'amda lavotenu, this word "he" is referring to the haftacha. It's referring Baruch Shomer Haftachato Yisrael, and that haftacha, that promise that Hashem gave to Am Yisrael, that covenant, right, the Brit and the Betarim, stood for us throughout history, and definitely in the hundreds of years we were in Mitzrayim, to remind us that there is a providence in the world, there is hashgacha, and somehow we'll get out of it. So, Hi sha'amda lavotenu velanu, this is taking the Seder forward into our time. The Seder and Yetziat Mitzrayim is not just a commemoration. The Seder is a mindset of hashgacha, of providence, that is critical to our survival. And that's why we make sure to use all channels of understanding to get the message across. We use language, we use singing, we use eating, we use everything. I mean, doing different things. We use every channel, every way of getting across this message, because this message is critical to the survival of Am Yisrael. And that is that somehow we're going to get out of this. Shelo echad bilvad amad alenu lechalotenu, that it's not only Paro, not only one person stood to destroy us and annihilate us, and Hashem echol dor vador omdim alenu lechalotenu, but in every generation they stand up against us to annihilate us, and Hashem saves us from their hand. Now, this is the basis for Mordechai's statement that we read a couple of weeks ago, that that if you Esther be quiet in this time, the Jewish people are going to be saved somehow, one way or another. But and this, when we know something exists, we know that there's some solution, we search hard for it. And uh, this is a very practical way that the Jewish people survived throughout history. The practical way is we know somehow we have to get out of it. When you have no choice, when your back is against the wall, but you know there's a way out, then uh, then you think of solutions. Of course, Hashem gives us the ideas of how to solve the problems in many cases, and He put in Am Yisrael the belief in Him and the belief that we'll survive uh, to to goad us to thinking of how to solve the problems. For me, this is one of the most important aspects of the Seder night to remind us of Hashem's promise to us in B'nai B'Tarim and that stood for the people, our people throughout Mitzrayim and the hundreds of years of Mitzrayim, and also stood for us in the Pasuk in Yirmiyahu. It says, "If it were not for my covenant with the of day and night, if I didn't make the laws of the heavens and how the stars move, if those don't exist, also the people of the Am Yisrael won't exist and David Melech won't exist." Hashem is basically saying that Am Yisrael will exist as long as the earth and heavens exist, which is a tremendous uh, thing to carry with us throughout a difficult history. So, like when we know something is there, present, and we just have misplaced it, then we look hard for it. Uh, Once there's some doubt, then we would say, oh, well, maybe we don't. Let's say if we're sure we didn't misplace, we didn't be sure we didn't throw something out, some paper or something, then we look very hard, and as hard as it takes, and we find. Knowing that there's a solution to the survival of Am Yisrael under any situation gives us the power and the the power and the determination to find a solution. Even presently, we are in a situation where there's a nation that wants to destroy us, and somehow, some way, Hashem will save us from that nation that wants to annihilate the state of Israel. Um, so this is a critical point of how, from Pesach, the providence of Passover, the providence of Pesach brings us into an understanding of how we can, how Hashem is watching over us and helping us survive. It's one of the big mysteries of of history. The big mystery of history is how did our nation survive? And the secret, part of the secret of survival is this providential hand of Hashem looking over us and the way we remind ourselves of this providence in the Pesach Seder. This is the critical aspect of the Seder.